All right. Well, that was a very, traditional Thanksgiving song, normally sung at Thanksgiving. Give thanks, think back about how good the Lord has been, how good life is. All right. I'm here to break and dismantle all of that. And we're preaching a very, in some sense, anti-Thanksgiving sermon today. All right. I say this mostly in jest, but we're in the book of Ecclesiastes this morning. We're kind of doing an overview of the book. So you gotta be quick, all right? Because we're gonna, we're not gonna hit every chapter, obviously, but we're gonna be kind of hopping around a little bit. And I think the book of Ecclesiastes really is, in some ways, kind of the anti-Thanksgiving book, because it's very depressing. It's very, what do I have to be thankful for? What do I have to look forward to? All of life is meaningless. Everything's going to be forgotten. And so, it's not something you would traditionally preach on Thanksgiving. But I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I want to preach it, is because I know, okay, there's probably somebody that kind of feels this way, all right? There's probably somebody in a group of this size that kind of feels that way, like, what do I really have to be thankful for? What do I have to look forward to? What's really my purpose in life? And they probably don't really, feel very thankful, even if maybe they should be. So I'll start by saying this. When I was at Southwestern, you have your Old Testament overview and your New Testament overview courses. Those things, it's an overview. You're not going to go super in-depth on any one book. So some nights, we cover multiple books per night. You're just kind of speeding through these things. Well, we spent, I don't know if it was the whole night, but we spent, probably, an hour on the book of Ecclesiastes, and we didn't even scratch the surface. But something that really stuck out to me that I still remember is my professor, he started out, and he wrote on the board a question, and we were going to basically try to answer that question by going through Ecclesiastes, and the question was this: if life is unjust, but God is just, then what is the moral value, or in other words, what is the meaning of life? All right? I think the first half of that question is something everybody can agree on, right? If life is unjust, right? Not only in the sense that life is unfair, but, right, injustices happen. There is wickedness, there is evil, there is adversity in this world, all right? If life is unjust, but God is just, then what is the meaning of life? In other words, what is my purpose in life? All right? Then, on the board, he wrote out 4 assumptions that the author of Ecclesiastes makes. The first 2 build off of each other, and the last 2 build off of each other. The first assumption is he assumes that the world was intentionally, purposefully, and intelligently designed. In other words, everything that you look out and you see in creation, you can see that creation itself has a purpose. It was created purposefully, and it has a purpose that it serves. The second assumption is, well, if that's the case, then life itself has to have a meaning and a purpose, and it has to have value. The third assumption is that humans are uniquely designed to live purposeful and meaningful lives. So then assumption 4, humans are obligated to live purposeful and meaningful lives. The problem with the author of Ecclesiastes is, I'm designed to have a meaningful life. I'm obligated to have a meaningful life, but how can I? And again, that goes back to the initial question of how can I really live a meaningful and purposeful life if everything is vanity, right? So let's start with chapter 1, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. All right? We're not going to spend any length of time dwelling on any one set of verses, obviously, because we're going to kind of fly by this. But chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Or if you're using a more traditional translation, right? Vanity, vanity. All is vanity. I kind of like that. What do people gain from all their labors in which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, there is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. That's heavy, man. That's depressing. The main theme of the book of Ecclesiastes is the futility or the meaninglessness of life. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the state of mind that the author ends the book on, but that is sort of the theme that the author carries through 90% of the book. Everything is meaningless, right? And I had read Ecclesiastes before, obviously. I don't know that I really dug super deep into it. But I remember very distinctly, again, going back to that Old Testament survey, Old Testament overview class, I think I was about 19 years old. I related on a very personal level to this, everything is meaningless. Nothing really matters, right? And so, in my mind, I kind of thought, man, Solomon or whoever wrote this, they were probably in that 18 to 25 age range, right? They probably weren't, but, it's fun to kind of imagine that. Because that's the age range that asks these kind of questions, right? What is the purpose of life? What is my purpose in life? Who am I? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? Even if I do something, what does it matter if I'm just going to be dead and forgotten anyway, right? These are the kind of questions that young people ask. I think the difference between old people and young people can really be boiled down to this. The young person asks, why should I work if ultimately I'm going to die and my work will be forgotten? That's what the young person asks. The old person asks pretty much the same question, but they word it differently. They say, now that I have worked all these years, what did my work accomplish and what was the point of it if I'm just about to die and everything I do is going to be forgotten? But it's all kind of the same question, right? So whether you're old, whether you're young, whether you're somewhere in between, hopefully you can find out your purpose. Everything is vanity, everything is, futile, everything has frustration. The sun rises, the sun sets, the wind blows north, the wind blows south, the river flows and then it flows some more. And this is the key, right? By examining, for the author, by examining the meaninglessness of life, he also inherently understands the purposefulness of creation. Again, going back to that first assumption, creation has intentionality behind it and therefore has purpose. So for the author, he's basically saying here, everything else in creation has a purpose, understands its purpose, and serves its purpose, except for me. And again, when I was about 19 years old, I related to that on a very personal level. Sometimes I think I still relate to that on a very purposeful level. The author seems to have no clue what they're supposed to do, what their meaning is, what their purpose in life is. The sun and wind may know, right? But how do I know what my purpose is? And you kind of get this idea of, just living to live or existing simply to exist, right? I go out and I go to work. Well, why do I go to work? To make money. Why do I make money? So I can eat. Well, why do I eat? I don't know. I guess I can wake up, go to work, make more money, and eat, and just repeat the same process, right? There's not really meaning in that. There's not really purpose in that, all right? The author here is asking, why does my work even matter at all, right? He's basically asking, is there anything more than the 9 to 5, which I think is something that everybody has to ask at some point in their life, right? But we all know that he assumes creation has intention, creation has purpose. So therefore, life has to have some sort of moral meaning or purpose. But again, does it have purpose for me? Go to chapter 2, Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and start in verse 3. He writes, I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens in parts and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Verse 12. And I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their head, while the fool walks in the darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Now, go to chapter 3 and look at verse 9. We're going to read for a little bit there. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and do good while they live. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear him. All right, so not only does everything, according to the author, right? Not only does everything that I do not have any purpose, not only is everything I do meaningless, now he says everything that I have is meaningless and has no purpose as well, right? And again, I think back to that, 18 to 25 age range. You're trying to figure out life. You're trying to figure out who you are, what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to be. And I just think, so many people, it's just, I'm just going from dopamine hit to dopamine hit to dopamine hit, right? And that's pretty much how this reads out, right? The author, he says, hey, I had a bunch of wine. I tried that. That didn't really fulfill me. That didn't really satisfy me. That didn't really give me any meaning in life. I tried women. Now not only do I not have meaning, now my life is a lot harder. No, he doesn't say that. I'm kidding. Ha, 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 ha. Thank you. He says, I chased after silver and gold. That didn't give me any meaning in life, Had cows, I had mansions, I had all these things, but nothing could satisfy me. Nothing really gave me any meaning in life or purpose in life. Not only does everything I do seem meaningless, now everything that I have or can have seems meaningless as well. And again, he's wondering if everything is vanity, if everything is futile, if everything is frustration, right? What's the point if I suffer through all of this and then it's just going to be forgotten? The question he's basically asking here is, it's like that country song, I'm not here for a long time, I'm here for a good time, all right? Some of y'all are probably, you're too young for that. Some of y'all might be too old for that. I don't know. I don't even listen to country music, all right? I know the reference. He's kind of asking the opposite of that. He's asking, are we as humans here for a short time, suffering, and then we die, and none of it mattered? Or are we here for a long-term experience? That's pretty much what he's asking here, right? Starting in verse 12 of chapter 2, he kind of switches to more moral pursuits. He talks about, the difference between wisdom and folly, or really the lack of difference, I guess, between wisdom and folly. A lot better than where he was, right? Before he was chasing money, booze, and women. Now he says, I pursued wisdom. That's all something we want, right? We all want our kids to go to school, get an education, get a good job, make something of their lives, right? And even this very, moral, good thing to strive for, he says, everything is meaningless, right? Because both the wise man and the foolish man, at the end of the day, are forgotten, right? Now, we have wise people who have died, and we still look back on them and we remember them. But how many more wise people have died that we don't have any books on that they wrote? We don't have any recordings of what they said. They just died and were forgotten. No one cared, right? How many more is that the case for? And even the ones that we do have books of, 20 years from now, there'll be a whole new generation of old dead people that we read their books. And the last generation's old dead people will be old dead and forgotten people. So what's the point, right? Everything I do, everything I have is meaningless and has no purpose, and it doesn't satisfy. And even if I start pursuing general morality or something objectively good, what does that matter? The dumb person dies and he's forgotten, and they bury him in the ground just as much as the wise person is. You can't unsmart yourself out of death. Well, then you get to chapter 3. You get to chapter 3, and you look specifically at verse 14 of chapter 3. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear him. God is the only thing that lasts forever. God is eternal, right? No beginning, no end. And what God does is eternal because God is always active in the world. God never stops working. So the only things that last, the only things that are really remembered forever are God and the things of God. And our compass in life, and our compass in our search for meaning and purpose is the fear of the Lord. If that's our compass, if that's what's guiding us, we're going to come to an answer. It might take us 12 chapters and a lot of depression to get there, but we will come to an answer, all right? Go to chapter 6, all right? Chapter 6, verse 2. It says, God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil, all right? Again, life is unjust. Life is unfair. Life has evil. Life has futility. Life has frustration. Life has adversity, all right? All of these things. Look at verse 7 of chapter 6. It says, everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet their appetite is never satisfied. What advantage has the wise over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? Right? Again, just existing to exist, living to live. And what's the purpose? What's the meaning of a life like that? Right? There really isn't any, right? That's just self-induced slavery at that point, all right? There's no enjoyment in anything. There's no incentive to work. And the author here is basically wondering, why work at all if the results are just the same, right? Or what was the purpose of all of my work if the results will just be the same? But the author is tearing down before he builds up. And we got just a little bit more tearing down, unfortunately, before we build up, all right? Chapter 7, Ecclesiastes 7, verses 13 and 14, 2 verses. Chapter 7, verse 13. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this. God has made the one as well as the other. So here's the key, all right? Both the author of Ecclesiastes and ourselves, we are living in a world filled with two things: God's goodness and adversity. Both of these things come from God, all right? My professor, again, going back to that class, he sort of phrased it in this. You have a tree, half of it is goodness, half of it is adversity, and everybody has to eat from both halves. Everyone has to have an apple of goodness, everybody has to have an apple of adversity, but both of those things come from God. And again, if our orientation, if our compass is the fear of the Lord, then we're able to eat from both of them. All right? The results of sin are not evil, okay? Evil caused sin. Evil caused the fall. Everything that came about after the fall isn't really evil, all right? You might be wondering where I'm going with this, but this makes sense logically, okay? Evil caused humanity to fall. Evil caused humanity to sin. Everything that came about after that, who initiated that? It was God, all right? Well, now the earth is going to be harder to farm. Who said that? It was God. Well, now there's going to be pain in your pregnancy and in your labor. Who said that? It was God, right? Well, now there's going to be all these natural disasters and hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes and all this stuff. Okay, well, who controls the weather? It's God. So everything that came about after the fall and because of the fall isn't really evil. It's what we would call adversity. Everyone has to experience that. Everyone has to experience both God's goodness and God's adversity, and both of them come from God, but only with the correct orientation of the fear of the Lord are we really able to do so, and able to find meaning and purpose through all of that. The author of Ecclesiastes and ourselves, we're living in a post-Genesis 3 world. A world after the fall of man. But it's because we're living in a post-Genesis 3 world that we're really able to find a meaning and a purpose and a value to life that we would not be otherwise. All right? I think it was Augustine, which is, for as much as I disagree with Augustine about a lot of things, I think he's the one who said this, and it's really good, right? Obviously, the fall of man was a horrible thing. The fact that man sinned and rebelled against God objectively was horrible. But through that, the most beautiful thing that has ever happened. The love of God came into the world. God sent his Son, took on human flesh, came into the world, died for us, redeemed us, and showed us love in a way that otherwise we would never know and never experience had humanity not fallen into sin. So the worst thing that could have possibly happened ended up also causing us to be able to have meaning and purpose and experience God in ways that otherwise we never would be able to. So you think about, had we never sinned as human beings, and we're still living in that Genesis 1 and 2 garden, right? We're a little bit better than angels, right? I mean, we're made, we're created differently than angels, right? We're certainly higher than animals. I mean, we're given, control over the animals, right? But can we really say we would understand the love of God in the same way and to the same degree as we do having sinned but also having been redeemed by God? No, we couldn't. So even through sin and through the fall and through all the adversity that came from that, we're able to find purpose and meaning in a way we never would have otherwise. So we're sort of reaching our conclusion here. So everybody faces adversity. Everybody has to eat of both. God's goodness and God's adversity. So adversity has to factor into the answer to the question, what is the meaning or purpose of life? The meaning or purpose of life cannot be to escape any hard times in life. There are some religions that teach that, by the way. Foolish. It has to factor in there, but that can't just be your answer. Your answer to what's the purpose of life can't just be, well, to suffer. And there's some religions that teach that as well. It has to be part of the equation, but it has to be part of the answer, but that's not the whole answer, all right? Paul in Romans chapter 8, he talks about we suffer with Christ, we're also glorified with Christ. We become heirs with God and with Christ. The meaning of life is to live as Jesus lived. Jesus experienced the goodness of God in ways that even we will never possibly know or comprehend. But he also understood adversity in ways that we will never know or never possibly comprehend. So the meaning of life is not to escape adversity, but to suffer with Christ and ultimately be glorified with him. All right? But we still got a little bit more. Chapter 9, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, 3 verses, 10 to 12. Ecclesiastes 9, 10 to 12. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Again, tearing down before we ultimately build up. But before chapter 9, the author says, well, none of it really matters because I'm just going to die anyway, right? I can chase money, I can chase booze, I can chase women, I can even chase knowledge, right? None of it matters. I'm going to die. Everyone dies. Everything's forgotten. End of story. Depression. The end. Now he kind of says, well, even taking death out of it, not even really thinking about how death makes everything meaningless. He says, even in the here and now, while I'm alive, I can't even really enjoy anything, right? Like I can't even really enjoy anything. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong. Food does not come to the wise, wealth to the brilliant, favor to the learned. All these things that I might pursue, he's like, what does it matter? There's dumb people that succeed. There's, weak people that succeed. There's, poor people that succeed. So what does it matter? I can't even enjoy anything here in life. Not only does, maybe I can live it up for, 80 years and then die, and everything's forgotten, but who cares? Even in the here and now, I can't enjoy anything. So what's the purpose, right? He changes his thinking a little bit, right? He realizes that nothing really matters because adversity strikes everyone. So then how does he come to terms with this, right? Not only is everything forgotten in the end, but even now you can't enjoy anything due to adversity. And it's here that we transition to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And we get the answer to all of this. The answer to our initial question, if life is unjust but God is just, what is the meaning of life? The answer to all, putting all these different pieces of the puzzle together. This is our conclusion, all right? Verse 13. Now all has been heard, and here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every evil deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it's good or evil. That is so anticlimactic, right? We've spent 12 chapters in absolute depression and having an existential crisis only for the answer to be fear God and keep his commandments, right? I don't know, you kind of expect a little bit more than that, right? You're like, wow, I never thought about that one before. What other great theological, quips do you have to throw at me? It takes him 12 chapters just to basically say, God's going to sort everything out in the end. So in the meantime, just fear God. But as we said before, our compass through life, our orientation, should be the fear of the Lord. Adversity affects everything, like we said. So adversity has to factor into what the meaning of life is. But that can't be the meaning in and of itself. The meaning, therefore, is to serve God and to fear God even in the adversity. Even though life is hard, even though life stinks sometimes, right? Even though maybe you do wonder, am I just living to live and existing to exist? Serve God anyway. Fear God anyway. And through that, you're able to navigate all that is life. Again, suffer with Christ, be glorified with Christ. And all of life's unjustness, all of life's injustices will be sorted out. The purpose of life is not for me to try to sort out all of the injustices I see in the world. That's a good thing to shoot for. We shouldn't just try to be the biggest, jerks we can be. That's not what the purpose of life is, right? Can I solve every problem in the world? No. Can you solve every problem in the world? No. Can a government solve every problem in the world? No. They probably just make more of them, all right? The purpose of life is not to solve every injustice, nor is the purpose of life to completely escape injustice or adversity. The purpose is to be faithful to God, to serve him, and to fear him in spite of everything else that goes on around me. The moral value of life is a life spent with adversity, but with that correct compass, the fear of the Lord. So, again, kind of a little bit of an anti-Thanksgiving message, but, I figured there's probably somebody who kind of feels that way, right? What do I really have to be thankful for? And that's kind of the author of Ecclesiastes. So, everybody, during our invitation, examine your own life and think back just on this last year. All of the goodness, all of the adversity, right? Everything that you've been through, all the ways that you've grown, and ask yourself, really do the hard self-evaluation of, have I relied on God? Have I relied on the fear of the Lord through all of these phases, the good and the bad? Or am I relying on myself? Because the reason we get in slumps like this is because we're not relying on God. We don't have the fear of the Lord. So really ask yourself that question. All right? Well, let's pray, and then we'll have our invitation. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for your word. Thank you that your word does ask hard questions sometimes, but it also gives answers, and it does point us to meaning and purpose. And I pray that we would all examine our own lives and make sure we have a relationship with you, and we are able to fear you and to serve you in spite of everything that happens. Just be with us now during this invitation. Speak to us, and just help us to look back on our own lives. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.